Hi, good evening. Welcome to the one of the two September meetings of the Somerville Historic Preservation Commission. It is for proceeding pursuant to Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022. This meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission will be conducted via remote participation. A recording of these proceedings can be accessed at any time using the registration link at the top of this agenda. The time is 6:55 p.m. on September 6, 2022. I'd like to call this meeting to order. I apologize to the public. We were a little late having some technical issues getting going, but we're all cleared up. And just a reminder, this is mostly administrative stuff. We're going to start right off with some memorandum of agreement. The first one will be 722 Broadway.
Pardon me, Chair Parks, do we need to introduce ourselves?
Oh, yes, right. Sorry about that. We'll start off with you, Vice Chair Kelly.
Sure. Hi, I am Robin Kelly. I am the Vice Chair and Realtor Representative on the Commission. I'm also a historic homeowner in Union Square.
Thank you. Mr. Falvey.
Hi, I'm Ryan Falvey. I'm a resident of Ward 2.
Thank you. Mr. Bauer.
I'm Dick Bauer. I live in Ward 3. I'm a lawyer and I was trained as a city planner.
Thank you. And I'm Eric Parks, resident of Ward 3, an architect, historic homeowner, and staff. Ms. White.
I'm Sarah White. I am a senior planner with the Preservation Planning and Zoning Division.
And Ms. Chekowicz.
Hello, I am a preservation planner and planner with the Preservation Planning and Zoning Division.
Thanks. Okay, so the first item on our agenda is a memorandum of agreement for 722 Broadway. And has people have a chance to read that yet, or do you want a moment?
Mr. Chairman, in the meantime, I'm going to unmute Ann Vigorito, who is the attorney representing the applicant, and I will unmute Christopher Vance, who is the architect. And I think that we will probably, Wendy, elevate Chris Vance to presenter so that he can share his screen if necessary. And Mr. Chairman, if I could, I just wanted to let the public know that this is a meeting where the commission is discussing items that can be observed by the public, but there's no public comment portion to any of these items. They are administrative processes and reviews that they need to do. However, the public is always welcome to observe. So, Anne, I've unmuted you on my end, and
thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome. And I think that Chris will likely be unmuted by virtue of being upgraded. Yes, he is just muted on his end. Mr. Chairman, go ahead. Would you like Ms. Vigorito to present anything, or discussion amongst the commission?
Yeah, no, let's give I forgot that we usually get a little intro from the applicant. So if you would like to tell us anything about what we have before us with this MOA.
So thank you, Chairman Parks, members of the commission, Attorney Ann Vigorito. I'm here on behalf of the applicant DeCamillo Associates. This is for 722 Broadway. After a few months of working with staff, they're extremely helpful to our team and reaching this MOA. I can read through what the plan is, if that would please the chair, or if however else you'd like me to proceed.
Sure, let's do a quick thing on that. This is because the drawings are kind of the meat of the MOA here and that they're referenced.
Yeah, so the architectural drawings of the exterior and interior conditions will be submitted to the preservation planning. The replacement structure at 722 is to be constructed in accordance with the plan set, which I can have Chris Vance go through for you. One historic interpretive sign will be installed on the exterior of the premises, such that it can be easily reviewed by the public passing along the public sidewalk. The dimensions of said sign, text, images, design, and similar will be the determination of the preservation planning staff. and that would be prior to any installation, on the final certificate of occupancy. So at this point, I would turn it over to Christopher Vance, our architect, to, review the final plans that were reviewed with staff. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Chris Vance, 254 Bay Road, South Hamilton, Vance Architects. I'm sharing my screen. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yep.
So as Ann said, we went through a few iterations with your staff, with Miss Wendy, and what we ended up with the final design here is we took, which from the original iteration that you guys had seen a few months ago, we really made a division between the 722 and the 720 Broadway site. And the 722 Broadway site being the historically preserved site. And what we did is we broke the building up into two portions, one being the new construction and one, well, they're both new construction, but one that mimics a historic brick-faced precast building, and tying it in with the bays and the floor levels into the new 722 building. And using a full face brick, you can see on the right side of the plan here, which is in your packet and also on the screen. This is the proposed color palette. So brick number 2, which is the darker maroon brick, would be on the 722 building. And then brick number 1 would be on the 720 building here. We also used an enlarged parapet to give emphasis to this site, which we are proposing to use some historic detailing with some corbelled brick. So this is looking at a section through the parapet up here. And you can see that we corbel out the brick, have some precast frieze with a veneer block and a precast cap, which we're proposing to be in this precast color here. And then carrying those bays down through and breaking it up at the street level with some canopies, and also articulating the pilasters here that carry from the roof line down to the precast base. And you get a little better sense of it in the three-dimensional images here. So looking at the precast frieze and parapet, which is a little blow-up detail here, you can see that we're corbelling out the brick, articulating the brick pilasters, and giving some emphasis to the 722 site. And again, it turns the corner here. We don't have as many windows on this side, thinking of future development with a zero lot line. So this was the proposed final iteration that we came to in agreement with and have in front of you today.
Thank you. And just to be clear with everybody, that we're only concerning ourselves with that portion which is to the right of the red dashed line there, the center of the building. So, yeah. Who has any thoughts about this?
I'm pleased with the detailing. I think that the added depth and details are going to be very helpful.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
I just wanted to add to the HPC that whatever plans end up going into the MOA, assuming it'll be these. So as you rightly said, the everything to the right of that line is what you have purview over. That's the property line. It happens to be the building next to it, which is where Lindell's is, and Lindell's will be coming back. Is also being demolished, but it didn't hit the minimum age threshold for your review. What this does by locking in this design, at least to the right of that dividing line, it means that, you know, if this project has to go forward at any point for review in front of the Urban Design Commission, based on whatever they proposed, that means the Urban Design Commission cannot touch what is on the right of that line. And I do have to say, and I know I've said this to the architect before, for the past 3 years since the new zoning has passed, we have been struggling to get the designers and architects that we work with to make one building look like two distinct buildings. And this is the first time that this has happened from a zoning perspective, at least, because it's called for in many portions of our zoning. And so we have now put this up on our bulletin boards to say, show other people, this is how you do it. So on that alone, we're very pleased, although that has nothing to do with your purview, but I thought you'd be happy to know that the applicant did work with us very well and very closely and responded to all of our comments. So that was very helpful to all of us.
Nice to know. Yeah, I think overall I'm fine with this. It's funny, the only issue I have at all is not to do with the part that we have purview over, which is just the lack of continuity of carrying the vertical lines down from the bays to something in the storefront. But that portion which we're considering for this process, I would have no comment on. I think it's fine, and I would be willing to adopt it as an MOA. Anybody else, Dick or Ryan, have any thoughts on this?
I don't think so. This seems like an appropriate plan, and I agree with Vice Chair Kelly's comments.
I would agree with that. I don't have anything to add with substance.
All right. In that case, I guess I would entertain a motion that we approve the MOA as presented to us.
I move that we vote to approve the MOA as presented to us. And I will make one little comment to the applicants. On the Willow Ave facing side, it's described as the west elevation, and I believe it's the east. So just a little typographical thing that I think you may want to check. Not to distract from our motion to vote.
I believe that is our motion. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
All in favor? Yes.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We'll do a roll call. Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, members of the commission. We truly appreciate it, and just want to say staff was extremely helpful with this project. We appreciate it.
You bet.
Okay, the next, we have one more MOA before us tonight. That's just for 17 Allen Street. And let's take a moment to pull that up here. We'll do the same process. Is there someone from the applicant who'd like to give us a quick synopsis of what they've presented?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's Attorney Vigorito again, and I will also unmute Evan Stellman from Khalsa Design, as he was the architect. And Wendy, if you could elevate him as well, that would be great.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Ann Vigorito, 424 Broadway, Somerville, on behalf of the applicant, 1317 Allen Street LLC. Mike Koretnik is joining us this evening as the manager of the LLC, as well as Evan Stellman from Khalsa Design, our architect. We worked extremely well with staff on this, and let's see. You'll see Evan will go through the replacement structure plans for 17 Allen. When we get to that portion, there'll be a minimum of one or no more than two historic interpretive signs that will be installed on the property so that they can easily be read by passerbys from the public sidewalk. And the preservation planning department shall determine the final size, layout, text, etc. At this time, I would have Evan review the plans and, of course, any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. So first of all, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Evan Stellman, offices at 17 Ivalou Street in Somerville, and as of Thursday, a Ward 3 resident, which I'm excited for. So the plan in front of you, we worked diligently with planning staff over the past few months to put this together. Generally, the first iteration that we showed you when we first came before you was a more contemporary design. We worked to put this together, which has more of a historic nature to the design with the materials. So this top rendering here is from Allen Street as you're traveling up Allen Street. So the primary material here is a brick material on the first 3 stories, and that's accented with recessed windows. And we're also using a cast stone water table, window sills, and window heads. And then the upper story there is a standing seam metal panel. And we segmented the main massing here with the more contemporary bay windows that come out, and they angle towards each direction on Allen Street. This bottom rendering here is just looking the other way. Oops, I'm sorry. There we go. Looking the other way, again, you have the 3-story brick massing, standing seam at the top floor, and then the contemporary bays that segment that. Moving on to the aerial view, you can see the more historic massing at the front of the building, and then we break up the massing along both sides as we work towards Milk Alley, towards the back there. And I'll just review the elevations real quick. This is our proposed front elevation. Again, main material here is a red brick, upper story standing seam. And then the side elevation, the right side here would be Allen Street, where you have the brick that wraps the corner. And then we transition to a standing seam and hardy building with this rhythm that breaks up towards Milk Alley. And then this is the rear elevation that faces the alleyway, the Union Square development, just standing seam and hardy cementitious siding. And then this is that right side elevation. So Allen Street would be on the left side here. And then these are some more cartoony 3D views showing the proposed massing and materials. I think that's everything we have to present. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Just to get my bearings straight, so this is that section of Allen Street that we had a series of demos on that are independent of each other, I believe.
Correct.
In this case, the context is of what is one of the oldest existing neighborhoods in Union Square is just being wiped out, so it's not as much to really relate to adjacency-wise. So this particular project is just 13 through 17, but I noticed in the renderings there's a large mass to the left of it, which I assume is an abutting unit. Does that reflect what's going on next door, or is that just
It reflects the recently approved project that's not being developed by us, but we just wanted to show the overall massing and feel of that structure.
Okay. That was kind of the question, is that they're going to do something of a comparable height, massing and all that. Okay.
That is correct, yes.
I mean, there's really no way to ask that someone make it look like a 1.5-story worker house when you're dealing with a 4-story building. It almost becomes absurd. So to me anyway, it's nice enough. I don't really have any comment on it from a perspective. We're taking measures to preserve through documentation and stuff like that of what was there. But what do other people think about this?
I will share that I think, obviously the scale is going to be a little out of whack with the rest of the street, but that's the direction things are moving, and it's relating more to what's happening back behind it. I do appreciate the little arch bits over the windows in the brick portions. That was a nice little touch, and just simply that it has a bit more interest to the facade than we see in some buildings. There's a little bit more movement and dimension, and interest, which is nice to see.
I'd actually agree with you, Robin. There is more as a pedestrian that would interest me about this as you walk by it than some of the other buildings we're seeing on pedestrian streetscape. So
Yep.
I appreciate that. Would you, Mr. Falvey, Mr. Bauer, any thoughts?
I have some thoughts. I don't necessarily enter into my decision about what to do about the MOA. I personally find it a rather ugly building, I have to confess. It has 3 stories that are one and another story on the other, and it looks like 2 different buildings were sort of squished together and not very well. I know that this is sort of the trendy thing to do. I think we're going to look back on a lot of these buildings in 10 or 20 years and say, what were we thinking? So sorry, I can't be more complimentary about it.
Thank you. Mr. Falvey, any thoughts?
I don't have the strong opinions of, you know, the appearance of it. I'm comfortable with it. I appreciate the extensive use of glass in it and the brick. You know, it would be nice to know what is happening in the other parts, other buildings in that area in the neighborhood, but that doesn't have any bearing on this. So I certainly can accept and appreciate this, and I think it will fit in there fine.
If no one else has further comments, I move that we vote to approve the MOA as drafted.
Second?
I second the motion.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay,
Okay, we'll do a roll call. Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
no,
and I will vote yes. Okay, well, thank you, folks.
Thank you, members of the commission. Thank you, Sarah, staff. Wonderful working with you as always. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
That concludes the memorandum of agreement. Now we have a series of, I believe, 7 advisory reviews for CPA funding projects. And for people, imagine the only members of the public are folks who are here for those cases, but we'll just be weighing in on each of these. We will take a vote on them if there's a requirement that we consider something significant for CPA purposes. Correct me if I'm wrong, staff, but if it's already been deemed significant, we won't take a vote. Does that make the most sense? There are a few here that were already considered significant.
Yes. Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you. Yes, those that need to be determined historically significant for CPA, historic preservation funding purposes, will need a vote. Those that have already been determined historically significant for whatever reason just need a different type of vote, which is like you should vote to provide the applicant with whatever advice it is that you come up with, right? Whatever guidance that you give, because I will need to provide that information to the CPA manager, and we don't want it to just be like, well, all this stuff was discussed, but no, formal advice given. So yes, we would like to have you bring a vote on those items too, and I can help you do that at the time.
Sure. Without further ado, the first one on our agenda is 90 Union Square, which is owned by the city of Somerville, would be the applicant.
Yes. And Melissa Woods, who's the Director of Capital Projects, is here to speak on this. And this will need both a vote on historic significance and you can wrap another vote in with like any advice that you would like to give them as well.
Okay. we just launch into it, or is somebody going to give us a quick blurb?
Melissa Woods, Ms. Woods is here to talk with you about that and explain what they're looking to do for 90 Union.
Okay. So we'll hear.
Hi, everybody. I'm Melissa Woods, the Director of Capital Projects for the city, and thank you so much for having me here this evening. We have submitted the initial forms to apply for funding, CPA funding, for a project that we refer to as 90 Union Square. You may know it as the SCAP TV building or the former Union Square fire station. We will be seeking CPA funding to restore the historic cupola on that tower that was that is no longer there. It was called for in the Union Square neighborhood plan, and we hope as part of a larger renovation, we will also be able to restore this architectural element of the building.
Thank you. All right, so I see in the cover sheet, or I'm not the cover sheet, I'm looking at the information. It's basically replacing the cupola that was there long ago. Is there anything else? Well, let's take this 2 steps. First, let's consider whether or not this building is significant for the purposes of CPA funding. And to me, it is clearly so. I mean, this was identified in the Union Square development, I forget what it was called, the thing, as a significant structure worth preserving. So attractive building, it's a nice asset, and it's distinct, contributes historically to Union Square. Anybody else want to weigh in on that subject?
It's in its original location. It retains its original form and massing and much of its original detail. It has a long history of civic uses, ranging from fire station to other things. It's something of a landmark. So seems very clear to me that it has historical significance.
Do we need to vote on that? I mean, this is a layup. We should just move on. Right.
Yes, I think let's do these as 2 separate votes, just for clarity. Unless anybody else has any thoughts on that, I would just go right into that.
Mr. Chairman, if I could through you, I think that's fine. You don't have to adopt any findings for this determination as you would have with a normal demolition application.
Okay. And we had a beginning of a motion. Heard from somebody. Was it you, Mr. Bauer?
So I made a motion to determine it historically significant.
I'll second
Okay.
that.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
and I vote yes. And in terms of advice, obviously, the primary thing is building back what was there, and there's a lot out there for documentation. I don't know how much the applicant has. There's a lot of images. I've seen a postcard that shows it, but I believe there are probably some better photos on some of the local history websites or just some of the people who collect such things. So obviously I'd want to consult with that. I happen to be a fan of making the clock operable. And it says something about civic space if the clock doesn't work. And I believe that the window that's in the tower is sort of like a modern,
Yes.
can't see from here, but that ought to be considered with the project as well to bring it back to whatever photographic evidence would show it to be. Maybe staff has thoughts on that.
Mr. Chairman, through you, yes, I do have a couple of photos that I can share with Director Woods that show a different Muntin profile for it. So I'd be happy to work with her on that.
Okay. And we're not voting on a project. We're just sort of voting to send forward recommendations, right?
That is correct.
So this is, I imagine this will be a work in progress, but I think, for me anyway, those are the bigger scope requests that I would put forward with this. Anybody else have any thoughts on this?
The one additional piece would be making sure that, you know, whoever is doing the work is a preservation specialist, you know, so that the carpenter joiner person who's doing it is a preservation person as opposed to just a, you know, someone who's more accustomed to working on modern construction.
What is the roof? Is that currently a asphalt roof or a slate on that building? I can't tell the picture.
Through the chair, there is a slate roof, but it has been patched heavily with a variety of materials.
Okay. Not that I want to blow your scope out of the water, but it'd be nice if the roof of the cupola matched, you know, if it's slate. And obviously any repointing and just general masonry repair work that comes with it ought to be part of it. Those are my thoughts. How about you, Ryan and Dick? Do you have any thoughts on this?
I don't think I have anything to add to what other people have said. I should just note that people came before the CPC probably 4 years ago looking for money to do the clock, and then I think never followed through on that. But there was actually a lot of interest on the CPC at that time in doing it, and I hope that there still would be.
It'd be kind of fun because then you could have little lessons down in the thing on how to read a clock for those who've never seen one before. All right, a little bit of humor there.
Through the chair, I remember in first grade wanting a Minnie Mouse digital watch. And my mom said I couldn't get it until I learned how to read, what do you call it, analog time?
Yeah, it's just trying to think of the official name
Mrs.
for it.
Knudsen was our substitute teacher teaching me time. My teacher was on maternity leave. And I remember putting my head down on my desk and crying because I couldn't figure it out and I was never going to get this Minnie Mouse watch. I got the Minnie Mouse watch in the end. So I do know how to read time, both digitally and analog.
Excellent.
And it is noted that you would like to see an operational clock restored. So all generations in the future can suffer through learning how to tell time.
Exactly, yes. You just write big hand on one of them and little hand. So unless somebody else wants to add more to the little list here, I guess we could vote to move, how would we phrase it, the suggestions. Should we relist them, or are we able to just sort of incorporate them by reference to what we just talked about?
Mr. Chairman, through you, yes, I would recommend that you make a motion to move forward the recommendations discussed in deliberation and move those forward to the CPC.
Okay, and that would save us re-mentioning it. That's fine. Is there a motion as outlined by staff?
I move that we vote to approve or make the recommendations that were just outlined in discussion for the CPC application.
I second that.
Okay. All in
Maybe
favor?
add a comment, by the way, on the clock, which is not only do people need to be able to read analog clocks, but it has Roman numerals, so they have to learn the Roman numerals too. I've been working on that with my grandkids, and they are ready to go. As soon as that clock is they'll be able to tell time from it.
We have a showstopper here. Okay, so we have,
Do we have a
we've all
second?
voted in favor. We had a second. I think, Dick, did you second that?
I seconded it, yes.
Okay, so when we had a roll call, no, we've all voted aye on this, and we didn't need to do a roll call now, which we'll start off with Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. So, thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you very much.
The next advisory review we have is 275 to 277 Broadway, which is the Elizabeth Peabody House. And do we have someone here from that?
We do, Mr. Chairman, through you. We have Katie Osella, who is from the Elizabeth Peabody House. I've asked, all applicants that if they want to put together a presentation, to be absolutely no more than 5 minutes, and that is a firm deadline for them. And let's see, Katie, I have unmuted you on my end, and you are muted on your end. Wendy, would you be able to elevate her to the presenter level, please, in the event that she has a presentation? And Mr. Chairman, if I may, through you, this has been voted historically significant for CPA HP purposes in the past, so that you will be providing advice to the applicant on the project they're looking to apply for funding for at this point.
Okay.
Katie?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Hello, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and Commission members. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, that's exciting. That's great. Let's see. So we at the Elizabeth Peabody House, we are making the push to replace our windows and repair them as needed on both our first floor, which was the original the original fellowship hall of the Broadway Methodist Church when the building was first constructed. And then the second floor, where the stained glass windows are that you see here, which was the original sanctuary of the church. And we are in talks with Platt Anderson Freeman Architects to come up with a more robust assessment of all of our windows and their needs. But we are requesting funding to repair and replace any windows that need such repairs. As you can see here, some of the stained glass windows have kind of been haphazardly fixed, I guess. They're kind of all over the place in terms of their needs, as well as our first floor windows, which are currently very drafty and are at risk of causing more damage to the building through weather and wind and the elements. So I've mostly prepared this so that you can see the current state of the windows. I took these photos today. So we also have these smaller windows that are on the stairways up to the second floor, and we're hoping to repair those as well, which have more minimal repairs than the taller windows. So this is kind of the general setup of what our windows look like right now, which is all I had prepared. I think that this is kind of the best way to make it clear what we're looking at. And we understand that any repairs that would be made would have to be done with the consultation of a restoration expert. And that's something that we would look into if this was to go forward.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So just to clarify.
I can see you again.
Okay. Are we talking about just stained glass windows or other windows as well?
So it's the stained glass windows as well as the double hung windows on the first floor, which are in need of repairs. So
Okay. And some other, oh, I think we were advised by staff, the stained glass windows, so CPA money can only go for what'd you call it, stained glass that don't interpret religious iconography or
yes.
things like that.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we have, what I didn't show in that picture, at the very top of each of those tall Gothic windows is a small kind of triangular shaped pane that one has the sign of the Eucharist, one has a crown, and we would not touch those panes. Luckily, most of them are in perfect condition. It's the rest of the windows that have all the problems.
Okay, so we've already established that this is a significant structure. We don't need to go with that. As far as advice goes, well, anybody else want to start off with any thoughts on that?
Again, I will simply say that, we want to be sure that any of the work that's being done is being done by qualified restoration specialists with the appropriate expertise. So making sure that they're going to be able to perform the work appropriately.
Yes, that's definitely a goal of ours. And luckily, the architectural firm that we've been consulting with, they're actually, they're finishing up the last CPA funded project that we got approval for. They have a lot of experience both with our building and with historical resources, and they know everybody that has that experience as well. So
There used to be several stained glass workers in Somerville who I don't know that are here, and I wouldn't mention them anyway for obvious reasons, but yeah, I would just sort of repeat what Vice Chair Kelly said. You want somebody who's good at that. That's a good job. Otherwise, I don't really have any particular thoughts that could help fine tune that. It sounds like you have a pretty concise scope. How about you, Mr. Falvey or Mr. Bauer? Any other thoughts?
I have no additional thoughts of my own. I agree with Vice Chair Kelly just about making sure you find the right talent to do the work.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I may, it might be worth the applicant considering for the additional double hung windows that they're having issues with, rather than restoring those double hung windows, which may or may not be original to the building, it might be worth them, amending their ask to the CPA to, install windows that are period appropriate to that building. Because that building originally would not have had like 1/1 double hung windows on it. It probably would have had 6/6 and depending on the size of the actual window, possibly more panes than that. So it might behoove the applicant, if they're going to apply for CPA funds, really properly restore those other buildings. Even if that means that they have to be, the double hung windows need to be replaced with, all wood, true divided light windows. That might be a better way to go for the whole look of the building, quite frankly.
Thank you. That's an interesting point. I just pulled up a picture. So you're saying then that the windows they would be restoring aren't actually original. You'd be throwing good money into something that's not actually representing the original design of the place.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, yeah, I suspect that those 1/1 windows are not original to the building and that they're later replacements. Now, like inspecting them up close, their architect would be able, a preservation architect, a preservation window or restorationist would be able to tell, but that is my suspicion. Given the date of the building, I don't see it as possible that 1/1 would have been what had been installed.
Yeah, I agree. I'm looking at the picture of it now. They do seem kind of incongruous with the rest of the fenestration there.
yeah, if I may, we intend to restore everything to as close to the original as possible. we are actually working with the Somerville Museum and local historians as well to find the oldest photos or images of the building that we can. There's been some questions about the clock tower we have, which in relation to the previous conversation, we do have a clock guy that I'm calling soon to get our clock functional as well. I think ours might be less of a hassle. But yes, we do whatever would be the most original or the most representative of the original building is what we are looking to attain. So.
Great.
All right. Well, unless anybody else has any thoughts, I would suggest we go with a vote on this.
And Mr. Chairman, through you, I would just recommend doing the vote the same as you did last time with your making a motion for 90 Union Square, which was, we moved to provide the advice forward to the CPC as discussed in commission deliberations.
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Do a roll call. Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So, thank you for coming to us with your project.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Okay, the third of these advisory reviews we have is 81 Broadway, which is the Mudflat Studios. Is there anybody from that group that would like to talk to us today?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, through you, Lynn Jervins, apologies if I pronounced your last name incorrectly, is here representing Mudflat Studios. I have unmuted her. She's unmuted on her end. And Wendy, would you be able to elevate her to a presenter level? So, Mr. Chairman, the advice that I provided all of you is they're looking to do a feasibility study on the facade of the building and just to kind of see a structural assessment of it. And I provided you with photos of the building from the 1940s as well as from the 1970s. So you can see how that front facade has changed a little bit. And so they might want to consider additional steps moving forward down the line if they phase this out and ask for additional CPA money in the future. So. All right, Lynn, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. And can you see my screen?
No, we can't.
Okay, there we go. Maybe now?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. I didn't realize that Sarah was going to put together photos, so I do have some photos that I put together of the history of the facade of our building, which was originally the old Broadway movie theater. So this was an architectural drawing before the theater was built when they were trying to raise money. I don't know how familiar you are with this building. Sorry, let me just do this instead. And then this is what it looked like around 1945 when they were showing movies there, and there was a pool hall upstairs and 2 storefronts. And then later in 1979, when that stained glass arched window was changed and the marquee also was changed. This is when we were doing construction after we purchased the building from the city of Somerville, and we're changing it. It had been a vacant building for about 30 years at that time, and so we were doing a pretty extensive project on the interior and only slight renovations on the outside, sorry. And then this was a drawing that was done by a Somerville High School student when we received an award from the Somerville Historic Preservation Committee in 2012. This is what the building looks like currently, except that we have since also added a ceramic frieze around the balcony that we added back when we opened up the second floor where the stained glass had been. That framework was still there when we did the building renovation. And what what we're applying for now is some funding to do a full assessment of the exterior condition of the facade, because that was part of the problem. When we did the renovation, we didn't do very much work on the exterior of the building. Most of the work was focused on the interior. And so there are some problem areas where we have some stucco that's starting to fail, as well as some metal trim. I've circled these in red so you can see them. Metal trim that's pulling away from the building. There's a fair amount of paint that's now peeling after 10 years since we did the renovation. And also more trim and holes that have developed in some of that metal trim work that we would like to get fixed. It's allowing water to seep into the interior of the building. Some of those holes have been poorly patched in the past, as well as up in the top there at the stucco area. And then this is just a detail of what's happening at the top of the building that had kind of been hidden behind a lot of paint, but that we were able to paint in different colors to make stand out a little bit better. So at this point, the funding that we'd be looking for would be just to work with an engineering firm to understand the extent of the damage to the building that needs to be repaired.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is one that has not previously been declared significant for our purposes. So we need to start off with that discussion. And now Historic, it's an old movie theater. It's been there for ages. Any thoughts on that among commissioners?
It's in its original location. It retains its original form and massing. Obviously, there have been some changes to the facade, but there is a tremendous amount of original detail that has been retained through the years.
Yeah, I totally agree. If this isn't significant, I don't know what is. It's had the usual modifications to, unfortunate, to the storefront and all that, which, you know, such is life. But to me, it's significant. How about you, Mr. Falvey, Mr. Bauer?
Yeah, I certainly agree.
I do as
Okay.
well.
Well, let's proceed with the vote for that first.
Do it.
Want to make a motion?
I move that we vote to find 81 Broadway historically significant for the purposes of CPA funding.
I second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Roll call, Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. And regarding thoughts, just to blurt in you mentioned having an engineer do a study to make the facade, make that storefront, I call it storefront, the facade weather tight. When I hear engineer, I get a little bit nervous because they're not artful people. So I would just want to make sure that this is done in maybe under the umbrella of somebody who has the expertise in the bigger picture of what you might eventually want to do with this. I understand you're not endless resources, but I think you would probably agree this was at one point beautiful. It still is very nice, but the entire streets facade was beautiful. And having an ultimate goal of bringing that back together in pieces or all at once or whatever you can finesse would be laudable. And so I don't know how that would translate into who you'd call for that, but there are people out there who would just say you need to do some kind of band-aidy things to make it weather tight, and that's all you've got to do, or maybe you square off the bracket, or maybe it's a preservation architect, or that would be my main comment, is just address this from the perspective of the ultimate, of a bigger goal of bringing back more than just weather tight conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would agree with you as well. I think that our goal here is not only to deal with those problem areas that I pointed out, but also that we really appreciate the grandeur of the building and want it to retain that look. And so we wouldn't want to just take down all that decorative metal trim. Our idea is more to get that repaired so that it retains that look.
Any other thoughts among commissioners?
I totally agree with your suggestion, Chair Parks. It's a fantastic building and, you know, dress it up even more. I think it's wonderful. It'd be really exciting to see how it ends up with all the changes that will be made or the improvements to the facade. It's a really great opportunity for that neighborhood.
And it may be worth, if possible, while the facade is being evaluated, to include in that sort of an investigation of restoration of the marquee and whether that's something that could be done as a subsequent project with additional CPA funding.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'm sorry, I don't have a clock on my building now.
Well, let's see. Is there room for one?
We do have up at the very top of each of those sort of column areas, there were these round half domes, and we did find those in the basement, and we would like to restore those and put those back. So there'd be a little bit of extra decoration at the very top. So I'll see what I can do about that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. How about you, Mr. Bauer? Any other thoughts on this?
Not other thoughts. I agree with everything everybody has said. This is a great project.
I mean, to me, you're on the right path. Of just first step is to obviously is to keep anything from getting worse, deterioration, and then just come up with a plan. It's a multi-year. Maybe you get fundraising, you get CPA money or whatever. Yeah. Okay. Well, if that's the case, then maybe we should move to the vote on this.
Ms. White, did you have a comment to share?
No, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Through the chair, no, I was just going to say that, you know, given the fact that the applicant has noted that they found other exterior components of the building that could be restored and possibly reinstalled, I think another piece of advice to them might be to keep that in mind and provide that to the person who does their feasibility study and structures report, and keep that in mind as something that they might want to consider as they go forward, because that might actually change a little bit of the recommendations for exterior restoration that they actually provide. So just something to keep in mind as they move forward, because if they do end up receiving CPA money for this, you know, what they might be looking at is a slightly longer project over the long haul, but that just might be something that needs to be done in phases after they deal with the initial problem areas.
Thank you. I move that we vote to provide the recommendations as just discussed and outlined for 81 Broadway.
Second the motion.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey? You vote? Brian, how do you vote?
Sorry, yes. Sorry.
And Mr. Bauer, no problem.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well. Thanks for coming to us tonight with your project.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Have a nice evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next case is 390, or it's a next advisory review is 396 to 398 Broadway. Is there somebody here with that applicant here?
Mr. Chairman, through you, I do not see the applicant here for that. We can put this aside until the end and see if they appear. If they don't, then we will simply reschedule them for another meeting. You're certainly not precluded from talking about it without them. I'll give you a little bit of a rundown on it. So it is it's a private structure. It is not owned by a government entity or by like a social service organization or that type of thing, which is, you know, often what we see come forward, but not all the time. And they are looking for money to do structural work on the building. However, they are asking for about $200,000 in CPA money for structural work. But yet there is a private project going on in there that is almost that much to do a kitchen and bathroom renovation. So the question I think that begs to be asked is, what of that project that is going on is actually going to impact that structure, and is part of the reason they're asking for money for structural work because of that particular that individual project that is going on. This is also not a time when, and they have been advised of this, where the ask can be just for, you know, that amount of money for structural work without any feasibility study and historic structures report. So that would be, if they come forward, the advice that I would give you to give them, which is that's what they need to ask for from the CPC. They're not at a point yet where they could they could ask for that type of money. The other thing is it's a 6-unit condo building, so that there is a good deal of responsibility that the condo association has to take for that type of work on a building as well. So how you balance that out and what sort of advice you give to the CPA, you know, should be based on, you know, all of those considerations. They've also asked potentially for some money for some exterior restoration work on the building. I think of some architectural details, but they have not explained exactly what that would be or what that entailed. This building would not be eligible to apply for the LHD Small Property Owners Fund because that is limited to buildings that have a maximum of 4 units in them, and this has 6. So there's a lot of detail that's been left out of this application as a whole. We've given you what we have, and if you want to discuss it further, you certainly can. And we could just, and if not, we can also just ask the applicants to come back at another time. Although those other times will be, you have a lot coming up on your upcoming schedule, so we would have to get them in sometime in October, either the 6th or the 18th. So it's up to you as to how you'd like to proceed, if you want to just move on with others this evening.
Well, what's the preference of the rest of you?
I think we should move on to others and see if somebody joins the call who can provide us a bit more information and context around this request, which we just don't have enough information to make any real decision about guidance. So I think we should move on for anyone who is here, that we try to get to their properties.
Okay.
I agree with that.
And just to fine tune it, is this a project where this is a historic district, right? And does that automatically declare it significant for CPA purposes because it is?
That is correct. That is correct. Automatically, yes, through you, Mr. Chairman. So that also means that whatever work they come forward with, they also have to provide an application to staff for any of the exterior work and even for the interior work, just so we sign off on the fact that it's not visible from a public way. So yeah, so this takes a series of things that they need to do.
I think that's fine. I think given that we don't have a lot of narrative about this project, it would be beneficial to them if they could be here to tell us what they have planned before we just wing it. So let's move on then to 73 Concord Avenue, which is the next advisory review. on our agenda. Is anybody here from that applicant?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Nathaniel Reynolds is here from the applicant team. And Wendy, if you could promote him to presenter level, please, while I brief the commission. This is a property, this is a carriage barn at 73 Concord Ave. And in 2012, 2013, it came in for demo review under a prior owner. So this is a new owner. And it was declared historically significant and preferably preserved. And the demo delay at the time, which was only 9 months at the time, was put on the property. After working with the staff at the time, they entered into a memorandum of agreement with the commission that was signed and recorded, so it is in perpetuity, that the carriage barn be restored. And that specific plans were approved for what that carriage barn would then look like on the exterior of the building. It has changed hands since, and these current owners bought it in, I think, 2021, 2020 or 21, I think it was 21. And they met with staff just about a year ago about plans to convert the carriage barn into another dwelling unit, if you will. And those plans have not moved forward in the meantime. And I provided you with some pictures and background information. And I believe that the owner will have a short presentation for you, also with probably some of the same pictures, but perhaps additional ones as well. So I have, you are unmuted on our end, Nathaniel, and if you are unmuted on your end, you can introduce yourself and share your screen and go right ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the time. So, sorry, I seem to be having some trouble with sharing my screen. I would have to restart the application and join again, but I didn't have any images that were different from the ones that were provided to you. So we can just talk you through the ones that we've got. I don't want to waste your time here. So as Ms. White mentioned, we bought the property in 2021, in the summer, and it has this carriage house on it. It was voted to be historically significant and preferably preserved. Sadly, though, the building hasn't been taken very good care of, and we actually have some concerns about the structural integrity and, mostly for the safety of our neighbors. So if you're looking at the image that shows the front of the carriage house, you see the right side actually abuts our neighbor's property, and the back side abuts another neighbor's driveway, where they keep I think multiple buildings keep their cars. So the roof is actually severely compromised, which has resulted in significant rotting of the roof, the underlying structure, the second floor floorboards, the sidings, and the doors. And while we're trying to figure out what the right thing to do is from a historical perspective, we've covered the back half of the roof with a tarp, and we've put in some temporary shingles. You can see that in the corners of the front of the building, just to try to limit the amount of water damage that the building's sustaining. And currently we are trying to engage Structures North of Salem, Mass to conduct our conditions assessment and historical structures report. And then if you look at the other images, they're all actually of just the same corner at different scopes to provide you a little bit more context. And but before we get any report from Structures North, we're under the impression that we need to probably replace the roof, the structural supports for the roof, some pieces of the siding, and potentially the door. And so you can see that particular corner that I showed you, there's a very big hole in the roof, and the water damage has actually eaten away at the corner of that building. One of those images is a bit of a close-up, and you can see that the main structural supports for don't even touch each other, which is a little frightening. In fact, and there's a hole in the floor, obviously. It's actually a little scary even getting those photos for you. And that's pretty much the situation for us. Oh, I should mention, while I was frantically trying to figure out how to share my screen. I wasn't sure if Ms. White mentioned the amount of money that we were asking for.
I had not, through you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. So in the initial application, we had asked for something on the order of 200,000, and that was only because we haven't yet got the report from the engineers, and so we weren't sure exactly what would be necessary in order to restore the envelope of the building. And honestly, we'd be happy for any help. That's all.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, through you, if I could, I just want to explain really briefly. So just so everybody knows, it's this is a new process, I know, for a lot of folks. But the HPC, the Historic Preservation Commission, cannot award money or advise on the amount of money that can be awarded. It's only the Community Preservation Commission that can award money and can award grants. And those grants are done in the form of the property owner expends the money first and then is reimbursed, which is how CPA works. One of the things I did want to comment on is that if you've contacted Structures North, I'm very, very, very familiar with them. And so they are, they're one of the right places to contact. And I'm not sure if the commission is familiar with them, but given where I live, I'm very familiar with them. So that is a good contact to have. And typically for this type of work, approval is not going to, even from the CPA, usually at this point is not going to be given for doing all that work and, $200,000 worth of it. But, doing a feasibility study and a historic structures report, might be something that they would consider. And that is usually the type of advice that the HPC gives to the CPC at this point. But just wanted to kind of explain everybody's role here. And thank you for that, Mr. Chairman.
And also, we're not voting on significance because that effectively happened already when we went through the demo process, right?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. Through you, you are providing advice to the CPC and to the applicant.
All right, commissioners, who has thoughts on this?
I think that exactly as Ms. White described and as the applicant also indicated, the path that they're on is obtaining additional information because it's clear that that needs to be done. It seems that if there is concern about the building collapsing, then additional measures should be taken immediately by the homeowner to see that, the building doesn't hurt any people or properties. So I don't know, if they've consulted with any contractors to shore things up, or if they've spoken with the building department, or I don't know, Ms. White, if you have recommendations as to best steps, given that, there may be some urgency to temporary measures.
Sure, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Mr. Chairman, through you, yes, so all property owners are responsible for ensuring that their properties are, did we just lose Ryan?
We did.
Mr. Chairman, we're going to have to pause for 1 second to ensure that we get Mr. Falvey back on.
Hey.
Oh, good. There he is. Thank goodness. I was thinking, oh my God, we're gonna have to go into recess and then go back into order and all that stuff. Good, good. Okay, so So as I was saying, so yeah, so it is all property owners' responsibility to ensure that their buildings are secure. So it's good to hear that they have put on some temporary shingles and tarp in the back and whatnot. But I think that this is one of the things that definitely has to be a priority for a property owner. If they're really concerned that it is going to fall down on somebody, then that's a different story than, wanting to get money for structural work in order to do further work or further development on the property. I mean, those are two very different things. And then ISD does allow for property owners to temporarily shore up their property in order to make it like weather tight, protected from the elements, that type of thing. So that is definitely something that they can do.
You hear what I say?
I think that my first question is, I agree that the first step should be getting an assessment to see what really is necessary. And also it's sorting out the priorities, because I'm hearing, path one is just to keep it standing. But I'm also hearing that there's a project involved here that was discussed a year ago that involves converting it to residence, change of use, all kinds of stuff. And those two scopes are sort of different structurally. If you're just looking to keep it standing, it's a simple matter. But if you're looking to convert it into residence, there's a lot more involved. And I don't know what we are potentially being asked to fund, what sort of scope. So that would be sorted out, I guess, by your report from the builder, the person you're speaking with.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we were in conversation with Ms. White about trying to turn it into residence last year when we first bought it. And after doing the due diligence to figure out the path of how that's possible, we've learned that it's just way more money than we have. So we'd have to win the lottery, I think, in order for that to be a real option. So we're back to plan one, which is just try to keep it as is.
Any other thoughts people have?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what advice at this stage we can provide other than to follow through with a feasibility study with a structural engineer and kind of conditions assessment stuff, and just getting a grip on what the current conditions are and what steps should be taken to stabilize the building and seal, kind of seal the envelope.
In my experience at Old Wood, structures like this, you don't just wake up and they're fell down. They just kind of ooze into the ground. So it's sort of like the slow drip of having to replace more rot if you wait a year. And so, but yeah, I'm sure you'll be told that by your assessment, people coming in. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's really it. So what we're discussing just is that you're going to get a report from these folks whose name I've already forgotten.
Structures North.
Structures North, and that will help inform what you may or may not come to the CPA for a funding request. And that the 250 or 200 that I'm seeing is a sort of a placeholder at the moment. Is that a fair statement?
Mr. Chairman, through you, yes, I think that the advice is that that the applicants seek a historic structures report and a feasibility study first, and I believe the CPA manager has I think has indicated this in emails as well, that that's typically the first step that happens if the CPC is going to provide funding for projects such as this. It would be usually that's the same type of advice that is given for things like 396, 398 Broadway if they were here tonight and that type of thing. So even on a smaller scale, Mud Flat Studios 81 Broadway is taking that approach as well and doing their conditions assessment and a feasibility study first. So that would be the methodical way of going through it.
Okay. That sounds rational. Should we move ahead with a vote then?
I move that we vote to provide those recommendations just discussed.
Second,
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We'll do a roll call. Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
yes.
and I vote yes as well. Thank you for coming to us. And before we move to Cross Street,
Thank you
do we
very
have anyone from
much.
the other Broadway project that's here?
Mr. Chairman, through you, no, there is not at this time. But we do have representatives here from the last two projects on the list, which are 59 Cross and then 1 Westwood Road. So they are here, and I believe they know.
Fine, then our next advisory review is 59 Cross Street, the Somerville Hispanic Association. We have somebody from them who'd like to speak.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have John Hecker, who is here, and he is from the architectural firm that has been working with 59 Cross Street since they began receiving CPA money. Wendy, if you could elevate John to presenter level, that'd be great. Just as a background, the 59 Cross Street is historically significant already, so you don't need to deal with that. They are a local historic district, which makes them automatically historically significant. And they have come for several rounds of funding in the past through CPA, so this is an ongoing project. And Mr. Bauer, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you might have been sitting on the CPC when they initially came in for some of their initial funding. So
Several rounds.
yes. So this is another round, and I'm sorry I didn't have like the full plan set from the applicant. I know that what they have been advised by the CPA manager is just come forward with everything that they're looking to do next, and then the CPC will determine, what they can fund and what they're willing to fund at this time. And just I will tell the HPC that regardless of whatever the CPC decides to fund, everything needs to come through preservation planning for various types of certificates, either something that will go through you and be heard in public hearing, or will be a staff level review. So I also wanted to make clear to anybody else in the audience who is listening that this is just advice to the CPC that the commission is giving now. It does not constitute a full review for certificate purposes, which would require a public hearing. So with that said, John, let's see, I think you're unmuted. You're unmuted on our end and just muted on your end. So if you want to unmute yourself and go ahead and give a 5 minutes on what you're looking to do, that'd be awesome.
Okay, can you see my screen? Can you bring that up?
We can see it.
Yes.
Okay,
So
then
we can see your desktop.
Okay, good. I'm gonna drag you out of the way so I can get to it. So let's start with the photos. I thought I would give you a bit of a behind the scenes tour and kind of talk about in that context what we're planning to do. So I'm going to open up. Okay, so I'm just going to run through these very quickly. This is the one historic image that we have found over the years, and we think it's probably from the mid 1950s. If you look at the windows, they're reflecting a lot of light on that slate roof down below. It almost looks like the copper flashing's been replaced. It's shining very, very brightly, and we just replaced that several years ago. This is actually a really good picture. It's really the only one we have. I think it was professionally taken.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, through you, if I could really quickly, John, please send me that picture. I don't even have that one and I would love to have it. That's very helpful.
Yeah, you know, I wish I could remember where I found it. I can't remember where I found it.
Oh, that's okay. Just send it to me. That's fine.
Okay, I'll definitely share it with you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so I have a few before and after, because this project has received multiple grants from CPA money as well as Mass Historic Commission money. Here's the front before, and there's a sagging roof that was substantially reinforced. That flashing that was shiny in the 1955 picture has been replaced. You can see the condition of the 6 windows up here, round-headed windows. You can see the sorry shape that the large semicircular window was in. We'll just keep going. Here's what it looks like after several rounds of work. New radius gutters, rebuilt flat arches, a new slate roof that you can't quite see. The 6 existing window sashes were taken out and repaired and restored, pieced in, epoxy treated, repainted, put back. The window up above, believe it or not, was actually in the attic. And going in the attic, this is part of your behind the scenes tour. You can see there was a fire up in the attic. The scissor trusses are pretty well charred. You see some of the basic structure there. We don't know when the fire occurred. This is on the inside looking toward that large semicircular window, which is maybe, boy, I don't know if it's 6 or 8, 10 feet in diameter. The actual window sash is off to the left back here. It was leaning up against the wall. So it was there, and it was taken out and repaired and restored. We've got a picture from the man who restored it. You can see one of the buttons had to be replaced, and Mason Cook does a lot of very fussy window work for us. You can see the clamp here. He's re-gluing it together. Everything else is kind of original. He's done some epoxy repair at the corner and reconnected the corner. This is another picture of some of the round-headed windows being taken apart and things fixed, connections remade. You can see in the foreground some of the condition issues here, but we're pretty experienced with windows. We like to keep as much as we can and put them back. Match everything with in-kind materials. Now we're going to jump to the front of the building. This, I think the project we're proposing to you involves a lot of windows. So I think from your standpoint, you're going to have a lot of questions about windows. This is how the front looked before we got involved in it, and we rebuilt all these flat arches. There was some structural failure, but just remember how it looks with the mill finish aluminum windows. And we'll get to the next one. This is 3 or 4 years later. Here's the restored, reinstalled original window, the 6 original window sashes installed. Here's the existing stained glass windows, which we really did nothing to because the money didn't exist. And luckily the storm windows protected them. So we had them painted and new storm windows put on. These arches were rebuilt. The dental course was rebuilt. The gutter was placed. New slate roof, new flashing. But it's a remarkable change. It's a beautiful building. Jumping ahead, this next slide shows you inside the daycare center at that time, and it shows what the window, stained glass windows look like from the inside. I call it kind of a cracked ice design. You have these solid color pastel colors around the borders, and then these very bright pastel colors in the middle. They're quite striking. Now this is a close-up of one of those windows. Other windows exist in the building that have a very similar pattern. They have these muntins that form a square in the middle and translucent glass around the perimeter. We see that on the north and south sides of the buildings as well. Here's a close-up of what that window used to look like with the original aluminum storm window on, but the glass removed. And you can see they're in pretty good shape. They really didn't need any work. We didn't have the money to do any work on it. Storm windows do a good job of protecting the windows, and so they now have new storm windows to protect them. Now we're going to move to the south side of the building. This is the existing condition of some of the south side windows. Just the upper sash survives here. The lower sash is there in terms of its frame, but the stained glass and the lead caming is missing completely. This is a worst case scenario, I would say. This is a really poor condition window, and we haven't done a condition survey of all the windows, but it covers quite a variety of conditions. Now, on the inside of the south side, you see similar windows that have that pattern that I showed you on the front of the building, where you have the Muntin profile creating a square in the middle. Here, it's just plain glass. So this is another type of window that exists in the building, primarily on the south side, of the south and the north side. Here's a pair of windows on the south side, and I'm showing you this one because, as far as I know, there's really no religious images in the building. It's more, I would say, arts and crafts, stained glass, and leaded glass designs with no images that I think could be construed as religious images, as far as I have seen on the building so far. So I'm trying to give you a range of what the windows look like. Here it's kind of a traditional grid of lead cames. This is another type of window that we see on the south side. Here, this is on the north side of the building. The Somerville Hispanic Association for Community Development has some office space on the outer perimeter of the building, and you can see how that light looks filtering through their office space. On the south side of the building, they have some similar spaces that are more like classrooms. This is an interesting, I'm going to show you this, and then I'm going to take you inside the building, this is a piece of plexiglass that covers up this round window, and you'd really have no idea of what's going on, except when you go inside and crawl through the suspended ceiling, and you get up in this space, and you see the original structure that's here. This was the original structure. Here's this round-headed window. This is a steel frame that was inserted into the building and some tie rods to keep the walls from spreading out. I should say, my belief is that the original structure was deficient, and this steel frame was put in, I'm not sure, maybe in the 50s, 60s, 40s. It's really unclear, but it was put in to stabilize the building. But it's a very interesting space to get into because you see things you can't see from the outside. You see this beautiful round stained glass window that's quite striking. You see this pattern here. Because of the drop ceiling, part of the window's up above, part of the window's down below. And moving along, if you look to one side, you see the kind of the hammer beam kind of structure that exists in some locations. Part of it was sawn off and removed when they put the steel system in. This is an area where we had some major truss repair that was an unexpected problem in one of the phases of work. All right, on the back side of the building, the back side is a very plain part of the building. The windows, I think, are fairly simple back here. There aren't that many of them. If we look on the north side of the building, we've got some issues that we're going to be dealing with in CPC or CPA fiscal year 21 work, which is currently still on the horizon, along with fiscal year 22 work. You can see there's some dental course issues up here. The gutters are being proposed to be replaced in the work scope that we've or that I'm describing to you now and included in fiscal year 23. So here you see those windows again that were in that office space, colored glass around the perimeter, clear in the middle, spandrel problems, arch problems, some dental course problems. This is probably the worst case on the north side of the building. On the second floor, this is where until recently there was a homeless shelter for mothers and their children. It's now changing over to a daycare center that'll be moving in to take over that space. Here the windows are much simpler on the second floor, and I think they're in reasonable shape. But again, we haven't looked at every one of them individually. Also on the second floor, there's a space that they call the den. This is the tower that you see from the front of the building. The round-headed windows are up above, and they're actually above the ceiling. So if you look at the next slide, this was poking my head up above, and here's the top of those windows. It's a little bit of an awkward situation. Originally, the ceiling was up here and it would have been exposed, but this is how it currently exists. A lot of different conditions. Then when you go through that ceiling, through a hatch and go up above, you end up in this space. This is one of the large windows that's being, or it's part of the work scope for the fiscal year 22 work. These are quite large windows. It's kind of a difficult floor to walk on. The access is dodgy, to say the least. And then there's another hatch further up, and then you're into the louvered belfry area. So we have a lot of different windows here to deal with. Swinging around to the south side, we have a condition here, which is part of fiscal year 22, to do some accessibility improvements, to cut into the site and to bring people with disabilities or handicap issues through that door, basically on a flat ramp, very, very slight slope. And then as part of the work that we're proposing in fiscal year 23, we would replace these not very handsome porch canopies with something new to be decided upon. We really haven't worked on that. There's some really awkward issues here, but we'd like to have something to protect people when they're picking up groceries or attending social events. A lot of people walk into this building from the sidewalk, and I think with our landscape plan, this might become a primary entrance, actually. And here's a close-up of the stairs. The stairs are irregular. In an ideal world, the foundation would be rebuilt, so these treads are of equal rise and run. It would involve taking them out, putting a new concrete stepped foundation, cheek walls in, and then reinstalling the original stone. And we're also proposing to replace these doors, which are difficult to lock, difficult to open, and are not all that secure. And we're nearing the end here. This shows the gutter that we put on the flat roof near the back of the building. This is the same design that we would use toward the front of the building, where we have looked at the dental course that projects from the building and which originally supported the gutter. Tops of the gutters are closed here to allow the return to extend. So we have tried to follow the original intent of the design as it survives in the brick, where the gutter was supposed to turn the corner and be sitting on top of that brick dental course. And then we've patched in the missing section here. So this gutter profile will be the same one used on the two missing sections of gutter that we have yet to receive funding for, and which would really more or less complete the gutter work. Now, if I could just close that, I can show you very quickly the landscape plan, which is part of the fiscal year 22 work that we're currently engaged in, and we have a landscape architect who has done a really nice plan, I think, to he's actually replaced some of the concrete with brick to soften the appearance. He's also, I think one of the members expressed some concern about the foundation being undermined here, and that's certainly a concern for us too. So he has swung this wall slightly away from the building. We still have to get a structural test pit dug here to check the condition. But this is the current design development appearance of the walkway from the street. Trees and a green swath that would line the space. Concrete walk here. We've got some, to save money, some precast stairs, a brick retaining wall with a capstone. It's, I think, actually going to be quite an attractive entrance to both the lower level. This will be the new handicap access entry point into the building, and then if money is available, these stairs could be and doors could be repaired, restored. So this could be maybe a primary entry as well. This is kind of a teaser. We're still working on this, but this is how it stands at the moment. And then I'll just do a quick run through on the drawings. These were things that I did by hand very quickly. It shows the gutters on the north and south sides as part of the work scope that we're proposing for fiscal year 23 to the CPC. It's the only remaining major roof work, flashing work that remains. The doors would be similar to this with an overlight, but on the other side of the building. This was for an earlier project. This is a plan view, new doors, new canopy of some design, that would be minimal and historically compatible, something we'd work with you on to get everybody on the same page. So we have something that's cost effective, looks good, not a huge visual impact. This shows all the different windows that we're considering that we'd like to deal with. And eventually we'll have probably half a dozen or more window types, depending on what they look like. And then we'll have a much more detailed actual inventory of which windows maybe don't have to have work done, and some might have to be repaired, some might have to be restored. And that's usually how we look at it. We can always restore by replacing with in-kind materials. And here's just some of the windows on the back, just to give you an idea of the scope. A major element that we added rather late on was at the request of CPC, we added a new elevator proposal and a new hoistway, along with 2 accessible restrooms. The elevator that we have been proposing through a number of phases is located here, and it would serve all 3 floors, and the restrooms would be flanking it or maybe side by side. And that's my presentation. What we're asking for really is a project that's approximately $1 million, but I think the CPC wanted us to show them everything that would more or less complete the project, and so that's what we've tried to provide to them, including the elevator, which would probably be, elevators are typically about $150,000, and maybe $100,000 or $100,000, $125,000 for the actual hoistway and the structural modifications to go through the building. As part of the fiscal year 22 program, we're putting in a elevator foundation pad at the lower level in anticipation of sometime in the future actually adding the hoistway. And that's my presentation.
Mr. Chairman, through you, could I just give a summary of what I think the asks are for FY23? And if it's okay with you, and John, I just want to make sure I summarize it. And John, just correct me on my accuracy after I go through the list. So what I understand your FY23 asks is being restoration of stained glass and non-stained glass windows,
Correct.
restoration of copper gutters, finishing up that
Correct.
project. On the right elevation of the building, as you're looking at it from Cross Street, design, let's say a historically appropriate roof to create a portico on that larger entrance and a protective roof on that sort of areaway that you walk down to.
Right, that's the north side of the building, some kind of canopies to keep people from getting wet.
Okay. Sorry, we just use left, right, front, back, no north, no south, none of that stuff,
That's
because
fine.
we're not in Chicago. There's no Lake Michigan to orient ourselves to. And then on the right elevation as well, replacement of those entry doors, restoration, which one?
We'd probably take them partially apart just to make sure that we're not missing anything. The ones on the other side were definitely built up, but yeah, it would probably be a replacement and something very, very similar in terms of a match beaded board kind of appearance, which is sort of typical. It's used a lot for churches, so yeah, we'd probably use something very similar. And if we can salvage anything, we would salvage it.
Okay. So that's door restoration or historic replacement of those doors, and then the construction of an interior elevator. One of the things that you would need to do is you would need to show what that overrun would look like on the roof, and mechanicals, because that would presumably come out the roof, correct?
Possibly, although there's been some new developments in the elevator code, which are kind of interesting, and we need to explore those. It's something that we've encountered on another project that might help us on the overrun. Yeah. Just to go back to the right-hand side, the entry doors, the stairs there, we're proposing to take the granite slabs away and build cheek walls and make that a safer stair to go up and down.
And that's the one into the up and down into the larger doors, not down through the area.
Correct. Okay. Yes.
Build cheek walls, and then would you replace the steps with granite or cement?
No,
or what would you do?
No, we take the granite slabs out and then we put them back in place.
Okay. So that, I think, is the list of the FY23 asks, just to summarize all that.
Yes.
For you guys as you give your advice. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, so there's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on.
Yes. And it's obviously we don't need to vote for significance of the structure, as we've discussed. And you've put quite a bit of thought into what's happening, so it's hard for me to think of any suggestion that you haven't already contemplated for this. Anybody on the commission have any particular thoughts about the process or the scope?
This is a really great project.
Yeah.
You guys have done wonderful work on this so far.
Thank you very much. It's been challenging for everyone involved, including Sarah and Roberta. I think we've learned to communicate better as we've gotten further along, and I think it's taken a while for us to understand the process, the protocol, in terms of some of the applications and whatnot. But yeah, I feel like things are working reasonably well. Our client can be a challenge sometimes, but yeah, they've gotten better too. But thank you for saying that. It's appreciated quite a bit, and I think when you see the building at night and you see the light coming through those stained glass windows, it's pretty striking.
The window restoration is just really exciting to see that. both my kids went to school right across the street, so I spent a lot of time staring at the building. They're at the high school now, so less so. And I'm fascinated by the number of designs, the variation of types of stained glass you have going on there. That was kind of interesting.
It's been interesting to us too, because the storm windows are so dirty and filthy and difficult to see through. And sometimes we're out there in bad weather, and it's just recently that I've realized that they have the square leaded cane windows as another variation. So we'll have to do quite a detailed inventory of all the windows to identify what is where and then the condition of each.
Mr. Chairman, if I could through you, one of the things that kind of brought all of this up recently was that there's a new tenant in one of the areas of the building, and they put forward, and John, I don't even know if you're aware of this, they put forward an application to replace windows with vinyl windows, and falling out of my chair was an option, but I decided I better not do that. So then that's what made us say, like, hold on, everybody's got to get on the same page here. What's going on? So, so this is good to see that, you know, John, you guys have been thinking about this. It was also the next step that you were looking to do. And, you know, as we said too, you know, the new head of the Hispanic organization is like, we've sunk so much money into this. I'm not trying to make a religious reference, but like, there's no way in heaven, hell, or purgatory we're ever going to approve vinyl windows in this building. So
yeah, well,
it's good to see.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, Sarah, because I got a call from Jonathan Schwartz on Friday.
Yeah.
From Kesher, and he said, "Oh, we need an occupancy, or we need a certificate of occupancy to get people moved in, and this is the start of a 3-day weekend." And he said, "Can you just do a little sketch with a little, you know, a little box that says blah blah blah?" And was like, you know, we're not really your architect, and so anyway, I did it. But it took me 3 hours to do it. So I did that on Sunday, actually. I sent it to them this morning. And so I think they'll get the occupancy permit. But anyway, and I also told them about the elevator. So I said, if you do any space planning, you need to coordinate with us. I didn't mention you. In hindsight, I should have done that. But I didn't realize that they were putting the vinyl windows in. That's news to me. So
yeah, well, that's not happening now.
No, that's good.
Real clear, that's not happening.
Yeah. So together, maybe we can kind of control the process and make sure they do the right thing.
Yeah, I think that it's worth having a meeting where all of us are in the same room. You, me, Wendy, Roberta, Sal is his name? Salvatore? And yeah, and these new occupants, because yeah, we definitely, there's a lot of cooks in this kitchen, so we definitely have to get everybody on board and on the straight and narrow here, especially if they're not familiar to working with the process like you guys are.
If you invite Salvador, make sure you invite his wife, Lourdes.
Oh, Lourdes, yeah.
She is, yeah.
She runs the show.
Yes, yes.
We'll make sure she's on board.
Yes. So that's kind of where we are.
Okay. Well, you know, the scope in terms of documenting. So you have window pictures of all the stained glass and the doors and things like that. That's all documented. You're going to proceed with, if funding comes through, with restoration. So that'll be one thing we'd want to see, just documentation.
It's going to be a lot of work because we're literally going to have to see the windows from the inside, then see them from the outside, and go one by one. It's a fussy process.
And obviously, we want to make sure the work is done by folks who are qualified, which she seems like you're well on that path from previous work on there. You have a restoration.
We do a lot of this window stuff, and yeah, I think we're pretty confident of the people we choose, the people that we bid out to. we don't trust it to just anybody. And I think that I think on this particular building, if you look at those 6 round-headed windows and the large semicircular window on the front elevation, that's kind of the quality of work that we expect.
Yeah, that's great. I don't really have anything else to contribute in terms of suggestions. Does anybody else in the commission have anything?
No.
Well, if that's the case, then we could move ahead with a vote, just to formalize our discussion.
Do we have particular advice that we're providing? I don't know that we've added any.
Yeah, that's a good point, Robin. We haven't really, I think that this presentation is so thorough and there, this is you are the expertise that we would ask others to obtain. So that's sort of been done already.
Well, I think what we would try to do is work with Sarah, and we will keep Sarah happy and keep her in the loop in terms of the communication and decisions, and just make sure that from a bureaucratic and a departmental or a commission, the Historic Commission and the Community Preservation Commission, we've dotted the I's, crossed the T's, so there's a comfort level with Roberta and Sarah about the work scope.
Sure.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, through you, yeah, that would be great. Because like John had said before, I think folks getting used to the fact that there are 2 tracks here, right? It's an LHD, and so they need formal approvals for this work from a regulatory perspective, and they're getting CPA funds, which takes an informal review from you guys initially, but they still have to put forward an actual application for this work to come back again. It gets a little confusing. So if Roberta and I are just kept in the loop, then absolutely. So that might be one of your pieces of advice, is ensure that, preservation planning staff, Sarah White and Wendy Chekowicz are, kept in the loop along with Roberta, Cameron, and just work with us, and we'll do our best to make everything.
I think what's most helpful to us is to know that is to be reminded of the deadlines. Like there's a big full application due for CPC on October 5th. So that's coming up sooner than later. That's the next big goal for us, to prepare that package for CPC.
Right.
And Sarah will see that as a courtesy. We would copy her on that whole package.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good.
So I move that we vote to recommend that the applicant move forward with the sort of recommendations and plans as discussed.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Do a roll call, starting with Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Thank you for coming to us tonight with this detailed explanation.
Thank
Carry
you
on.
for your time and your input.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Will you log me out or how?
Yes, I will. I'll log you out now, and that'll kick you out of the meeting. And if you have any desire to come back and watch the rest, you're more than welcome. You just have to log back in again.
I've got a salmon dinner waiting for me.
If somebody gets to eat, I'll get there eventually.
Do what you gotta do there.
That's right.
Thanks,
All
thanks
right.
everyone. Appreciate it.
bye-bye.
Good night.
Okay, so the final case, unless the other Broadway people come, would be 1 Westwood Road, the Somerville Museum. Which I would.
Yes, that is correct, Mr. Chairman, through you. Wendy, can you elevate Barbara, please, to a presenter level and get her unmuted? Mr. Chairman, if I may, there are essentially 4 distinct asks that the Somerville Museum has that they'll be briefly presenting. One is a series of paintings. There are I believe it's 4 paintings that they would like to restore. The 4 paintings have a direct connection to Somerville's history. And you would need to determine that the paintings are historically significant for CPA HP funding purposes. Combined with that, there is also the 18th century Charles Bulfinch staircase. It was taken out of an 18th century home that was demolished and installed in the Somerville Museum building decades ago, and it's sort of definitely got pride of place in the middle of that building. It is covered by a preservation restriction from a previous round of CPA funding, but still that structure would need to be, that element would need to be declared historically significant for CPA funding purposes. The next ask is for to do essentially a study, essentially a feasibility study about fire suppression and climate control systems, and the renovation of the attic space in order to house said systems. For that, you would need to provide advice. The funding of the actual attic renovation is not coverable by CPA funds, but the study of getting it ready to house any potential fire suppression and climate control systems is. And then the last ask is for funds for a part-time temporary collections manager. And so that just needs advice going to the CPC. The recommendation on that is that they have a set plan and a set schedule and a set of specific things that they want that collections manager to concentrate on first, so that there's actually guided effort as that goes forward. So that would be advice that's recommended to give to the CPC. And so with that, Barbara, are you able to share your screen? Wendy?
Barbara was made a presenter. She, however, will need to unmute herself. And also, if you go to the sharing button above, you should be able to share your screen.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. All right, let me go back then to the view. Okay. Can you all see it? Can you all see my screen?
No.
No.
Oh, okay. So I had said not showing everything, sharing, show. Okay, it's doing secured. Why is it not showing? Whenever I click it, it goes to, gives me deny or open system preferences. Share my webcam. I don't think we want that, do we? Not showing anything. Well, I'm having difficulty. I wonder if it thinks that do I have to do accessibility or something like that? I never have this problem on Zoom, so I don't know why I'm having this problem here.
Mr. Chairman, if I could through you, I have images of the paintings. Barbara, I could pull them up on my screen and share them if that's easier for you, or the commission has the images in front of them if you want to just go through them.
Yes, they do. Well, maybe that's what I should do, unless someone has a better idea as to how I could get this to be shown.
Let me see, just give me 1 second here.
Yeah, why don't we just go through what you've got?
All right, 1 second. Now it's going to take me a second to get to everything. All right.
so funny because it's definitely saying I must have some kind of a privacy setting that's not allowing it to
All
share.
right. Well, what I will do is I will share mine. I've got the file, and if you'll just give me a second to share my screen.
Okay. Do I need to stop sharing or not really
Yeah,
sharing?
well, it doesn't see, we can't see anything of yours. I don't think it's an issue, but let me see if this works.
All right.
Because if we both have problems, and that's a whole nother thing entirely.
Okay.
Hmm. Okay, yeah, actually, Barbara, it says waiting to view Barbara's screens. Ah, there we go, there we go, there we go.
Yeah, I saw something there briefly.
All right, you're going to have to speak because I can't see you anymore. Can you see my screen where it says biography of the
No,
historic significance reviewer?
no, I don't see your screen.
We can see your screen.
You guys can?
Now I
Yes.
see it.
All right,
Okay.
all
Now I
right.
see it. Okay, so you can just go to, all right. So
Yeah.
first I just wanted to mention, like, I know I only have 5 minutes. So my understanding was that this would just be the historic significance of these
Yes.
particular paintings.
Correct.
I did not expect to be discussing the condition per se,
No.
although I can certainly do that.
Mm.
And I can also tell you who the conservators will be and all of that kind of thing if you're interested in who will be doing the work. So that's really just up to you and how much detail you want in terms of hearing about it. The one thing I think that you're not seeing in this painting here, which is of Mary Sawyer Tyler, who is the Mary of Mary Had a Little Lamb. This painting was actually, let me just tell you, was actually done in 1883 by an artist, T.H. Badger. And we have a companion piece to it, which is Columbus Tyler, which you did not have a picture of before, but I do have a picture now. Unfortunately, you're not able to see it. So I do hope that I could figure out how to share the screen. But anyway, so both of these, Mary Sawyer Tyler and Columbus Tyler, they were residents of Somerville. They both of them worked actually at the McLean Asylum, and he worked for about 36 years there as the attendant, and was also involved with the gardens and everything else. The McLean Asylum for the Insane is an historical fixture of Somerville, and then of course went to Belmont, and has its own significant history. So there's a lot of reasons to consider these portraits historic. The grounds on which this couple lived was on Central Street, and it's now actually, they left it apparently to a Unitarian church, who then eventually, it was bought by the Greek church. So that's where the Greek church is, on Central Street is where they lived. So as far as, you know, its importance, I think it's important from another number of reasons. It's, I think it's a well done portrait. It's of someone who was important to the history of Somerville, both for Columbus Tyler and for Mary Sawyer Tyler. And of course, Mary Sawyer Tyler has additional fame for being the Mary of Mary Had a Little Lamb. So do you need me to go on any further? Do you want to make some kind of a determination of historic significance on those particular paintings before we go on to another?
Mr. Chairman, through you, I would recommend that you take them all together at the end and get through the explanations first.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. Let's do that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the portrait of Eunice G. Gilmore. She's G for Giles Gilmore. She was the daughter of John Gilmore, who lived in Union Square and is actually a descendant of James Miller, who died and during the Revolution, and was the one who said, you know, I cannot run. I am too old to run, I believe he said. Anyway, this is from 1887. It's a very nice portrait. It's the best portrait I think we may have in our collection. It's by Karnak Eksergian, who's an Armenian, and I did more work on him and understanding him, and found that he actually lived in Somerville later in his life. Initially, he was in Boston. It's a beautiful piece. The piece itself is in terrible shape. As you could see, it had water damage, but this can be conserved. And it's a very large painting as well. The subject, again, of the reason that the museum actually has this is that Eunice Gilmore, she, again, grew up here in Somerville. She was a dressmaker in Boston. She met Edwin Gilmore, who was a widower at the time, and moved to Easton. He was quite wealthy, and she never forgot her roots. And she, in her will of 1927, left $2,000 to build the building of the Somerville Museum. And she was also a member of the Epitorian Society and was very active in women's clubs and other clubs in Somerville. This one, which again, I have a better picture of, but you can kind of see it, is of the mayor, Glines, and he was the 11th mayor of Somerville, but he was also, and this is a very large portrait as well, he was also a state senator, a representative. He was also on the Common Council of Somerville and president for several years. So he has a lot of connections with the city and the workings of the city. It's also a very nice portrait. It's very yellow, as you can see, and there's also damages throughout, which you can kind of see. And so we do want to have it conserved. So in the new collection facility that we are building right now, or getting ready to build, we actually have a specific storage for paintings. And so these paintings will be cared for very well after they are conserved, and they'll be hung on a grid, so that if people want to see them, they can make an appointment and come down, and we will then be able to fairly easily be able to show them. And some of them also may be put on view. Okay, here's the Charles Bulfinch staircase that I think most of you know, from 1792. It's from the Barrow Mansion that was on Cobble Hill in Charlestown at the time, and it was part of the residence of Joseph Barrow, who is, as far as I know, pretty upstanding guy, who was a merchant in Boston, very wealthy, and had extensive gardens over at this mansion, which is one of the reasons it eventually became the McLean Asylum, because that idea of asylum was a place for those with mental problems, where they would be treated with kindness and comforting surroundings rather than bedlam, that kind of thing, in England. So in this case, there are several coats of paint on this, and they're flaking. One layer is lead, and then we also have a broken baluster that we want to get repaired. But because of the way that the whole thing is built, it actually is built such that you almost have to take out that entire side of the balusters to get to it. So that is a pretty pricey project for us, being about $56,000 to do the entire thing. $40,000 is just for the paint removal and reconstruction. So I don't know if you need anything further on the staircase. There's lots of material on the importance of the Barrow Mansion and Charles Bulfinch as architect.
Mr. Chairman, through you, can you all no longer see my screen? Or can you still see my screen?
I still see the screen.
Okay.
I don't.
Excellent, thank you. And I would just like to apologize to everybody for the commotion you heard. There's a small interspecies kerfluffle between the cat and the dog, so I apologize for the noise.
Well, we've discussed 2 of the 4 items on the list, the paintings and the railing. And I think we're going to take them individually as significance votes for each of the categories. So we're going to lump the paintings together, but that'll be its own vote. And then we'll follow up with the railing. And
Well, it's the Bullfinch staircase, Mr. Chairman.
but yeah, sorry, getting free and loose with my descriptions. In any case, they both, everything you've described so far seems pretty clearly significant to me for local reasons. Obviously, Bullfinch, anything to do with him or that building is certainly worthy of keeping going, especially when it's the focal point of that entire space in that museum there. And the paintings are very interesting to me, and I enjoyed reading the more detailed information that was presented, so that was good. Anybody else have any thoughts on those 2 subjects?
The paintings to me seem very clearly, to have strong ties to Somerville and its history, and so preserving those makes good sense. And of course, the Bullfinch staircase has, its own prominent place in Somerville history, so that seems quite clear that it is significant.
Mr. Falvey, any thoughts on those?
I totally agree. I think great stuff. Really nice to see that. I appreciate Barbara's time sharing the history. Really very interesting stories and such. Fully support the significance of those.
I do too. There's like nothing to talk about.
Mr.
Let's
Chairman,
go
I could give you a much more extensive history. So maybe we can have a tour sometime.
Yeah,
That'd
that would
be
be
great.
fun. Yeah. It's actually, I was distracted because the picture of Eunice, was that her name?
Yeah, Miss Eunice Gilman.
I'm pretty much face blind, but that picture really, really looks similar to one that I have in my great-grandmother's photo collection from the late 1890s of a
Really?
woman dressed with a. And so I'm gonna, when we're done with the meeting, I'm gonna dig up and see if there is a similarity, and if so, I'll sing it your way. We had a whole bunch of old glass slides from her. She was a high school kid in the late 1890s, and so a lot of them are just portraits of people that they knew. Anyway, so it sounds like there's really nothing more to talk about with those particular subjects. We could move to a vote for significance on those.
I move that we vote to find the paintings, the 4 paintings, historically significant for the purposes of CPC funding.
I second the motion.
In favor, say aye.
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 And we'll do a roll call, or opposed. But roll call, Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. Let's do the significance on the staircase next before we go to the.
Yep. I move that we vote to find the Bullfinch staircase historically significant for CPC funding purposes.
Second that too.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Right, roll call, Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes as well. Shall we cover no, we don't have significance on the other two. So let's, do we have anything in terms of recommendations for the first two subjects? And I don't feel like I could meaningfully make any suggestions on how to restore paintings. I imagine you have far more background in that, and same thing with the railing. It sounds like it's pretty much refinishing the paint and restoring a couple of broken pieces of balusters.
Mr.
So I don't
Chairman, I
know.
wish it were so simple.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. I mean,
it wouldn't cost nearly so much if it could be done just as a simple project like that. But thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, it
I don't mean
it will be
it's
done by
obviously-
a conservator who knows what they're doing for sure.
Okay. I guess that would be the only input, is just making sure someone who can
Right.
knows their way around woodwork.
Conservator for the paintings is Gianfranco Pogobeni, who's the conservator at Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, as well as he was earlier at the FOG. So he is very highly qualified. And I'll be presenting some more paintings in a pastel for your consideration at the October meeting. So that will be something to look forward to, I hope.
Does anybody have anything that they would add as a suggestion for those two scope items, the painting and the railings, or the staircase?
I think only the sort of standard proviso that folks remain in good contact with staff about any works, you know, in this case, particularly with the staircase.
I would say that because the staircase has lead paint, we will be dealing with, you know, OSHA EPA types of regulations. The proposal does not do anything to that would cause dust to be produced. So that's why it's a very slow process. Right now, we're looking at basically tape, where you just tape it on and then you slowly pull the tape off, and with it comes the loose paint. So, but doing that all over the piece.
Is that in combination with chemicals, so like the peel away kind of thing, or?
No, we're not going to do any chemicals because at this point, we are not actually going down to the original paint layer. We're trying to go down through 2 layers. It's probably got at least 4 layers on it. And the lead paint layer is the second layer from the top. So we're going down to that because to do a full restoration would be even longer and more difficult, because you're right, we would have to stop, you know, right before that original layer, and that's going to be very difficult because that layer is intact.
Yeah, I didn't know you could do that. Selectively remove layers of paint.
Yeah, yeah, you can. Yep. Sometimes you can even do it mechanically, and that takes years, i.e. with a scalpel.
Okay. So I guess we need a vote just to formalize that this suggestion is put forward by Vice Chair Kelly with the standard language, consulting with staff. Is there anything else we want to wrap into that? I don't think so.
Do we want to include what Ms. White talked about earlier with regard to the part-time temporary collections person, that they have a very specific sort of project list to tackle, and that information be provided for consideration?
Well, basically if I could just mention, so this person Gentle Giant will be bringing back all of the collection, over 3,000 pieces, to the museum. This collection manager will there's a whole standard way of processing these collections. And it's not just, you know, kind of an administrative duty. In this case, it's, you know, you take a photograph so that you've got the condition, you fill out a condition report on the piece. That has to do with an inventory. So we're establishing the inventory now, but there are many pieces that have not been inventoried, so they have to be entered into our inventory. So all of that is part of this process. And then any kind of stabilization that has to be done to the object before it can be put into the new climate controlled storage is going to have to be done. So this person is going to be working with volunteers to do all this work. But it is a very stage by stage kind of process. And yes, I will definitely be talking more about that in the conservation proposal to CPC.
Mr. Chairman, if I could to Vice Chairman Kelly's point, and with the additional information provided by Barbara, since you're taking a vote on advice now, if you did want to wrap in the advice such that, you know, about the staircase, about keeping in touch with staff and keeping staff updated. And then as far as the collections manager goes, you know, following, you know, standard museum protocol for like the type of reaccessioning work that they're doing. And then for the fire and fire suppression system and HVAC study, climate control study for that attic area. You might want to add some good thoughts about that and then wrap it all into one vote on advice.
Sure. We didn't really talk about the climate control yet. There's obviously no need to discuss significance of that.
Right. They're just asking, I think it's for a study, I think is what qualifies now, a study for the fire suppression system and the climate control system and how the attic would be renovated for it.
Right.
I think that's the right thing to do. So I can only agree that that ought to be done. I don't have anything to contribute advice-wise. Anybody else? Hearing no other suggestions, then I guess we could proceed with a vote to formally put forward the recommendation we've discussed so far in those 4 subjects.
So moved.
We ask staff, is there anything special with regard to the staff person in terms of our jurisdiction?
Mr. Chairman, through you, there's nothing really as far as that I can think of other than, you know, following standard, you know, museum accessioning protocols and make sure that there's like, you know, I mean, like Barbara said, there are like many objects to bring back, but what the CPC will be willing to fund, who knows if it will fund bringing back all of those objects or only some of those objects. I don't know. So, because I think that's only for like a temporary part-time, and whether or not that'll be funded, the CPC will have to decide. But I would just recommend that it's, you know, as we said before about following those, you know, standard museum, you know, protocols, et cetera, as Barbara mentioned, that there's a whole process that they have to go through to do it.
Yeah, so through the chair, I'd just like to say that to Ms. White, that, you know, this, we were told before that the CPC would not fund bringing back the collections.
Right.
So we don't anticipate having the CPC fund any part of that. So it's once they're back, then that's when they get taken out and, you know, whatever preservation methods and processing methods are going to be done to them is done.
I see. So that helps because that wasn't clear in the application. So is that, so it's beyond accessioning, is it, and it's beyond inventory, or will it end up being
It's
inventory?
not accession, except for the fact that, you know, you have to keep control of the collection, right? So that's paramount. So the pieces Many have been accessioned, but I'm sure we will find a lot that have not been accessioned.
Mhm.
So this person may then give those, we have a collection care team who does accessioning. And so those might go to that person. But in terms of condition, you usually always want to have some kind of a photograph of the condition of the object for
Right.
preservation methods. So that will be
Right.
done again with volunteers. It may be that that person, you know, is not actually doing the photography, but is controlling it or making sure that it's up to snuff, essentially.
So essentially managing that process.
Yes,
Is what their
that's
role.
right. That's
Got
right.
it.
Ideally, we would only bring back a few objects at a time, and then we would be able to, you know, do what we need to and get those into the collection. Then we would go bring more. But the cost of doing that is not what we have with Gentle Giant.
Right.
So instead, you know, the money that we have is for it to be brought back in one whole thing. So I'll be
Got it.
talking with you, Ryan, Mr. Falvey, to see what we can do about that. But anyway, that is something that we do have to control.
So, Mr.
Thank
Bauer,
you,
I'm not
Sarah.
sure. Hopefully, that's helpful in providing a bit more of explanation of scope.
Okay. I've lost track of where we were in that. We were,
Vote on any advice on the items. Like I think you had some advice
already-
on Bullfinch, keeping in touch with staff, and then pursuing. I think you said advice is like, you know, you recommend pursuing the feasibility studies for the fire suppression, HVAC, and attic renovation.
And
I think
you-
we had a motion already. Did Vice Chair Kelly, did?
Yeah, so you described what you wanted and I said so moved, and then we needed a second.
Okay, so we're at the second,
Second,
seconded by Mr. Bauer. All in favor, say aye.
I,
Aye.
aye.
Roll call, Vice Chair Kelly,
yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes as well. I think that wraps everything up there for that, right? Yeah, thank you, Barbara, for coming to see us with all this.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara. Great stuff.
Thank you again.
And unless, I think we decided that unless we get an applicant representing 396, 398 Broadway, we're going to just move that to a subsequent hearing. That's still the
Correct.
pleasure of the, all right. So that being the case, we're through with advisory reviews. And all we have left is the staff approvals item, which we have, I think you sent us something, Sarah, that on that. Pull that out.
Correct, Mr. Chairman.
Why don't you give us a rundown on that, like switch
Sure, now I have
screens?
to, now I have to pull up my, no, let me just pull that up 1 second. All right. I'm going to pull it up and I'm going to share my screen in a second here. All right. Can you see the document on my screen?
Yes.
Mhm.
Excellent. Thank goodness. Okay. Yes. So, so one of the things that we talked about in the last meeting was coming forward with some language to the commission that would allow staff level approvals of some work for a variety of reasons. One, to help local historic district property owners actually move a little bit faster on some of their projects. Sometimes when they've submitted their application, the next meeting isn't for quite a while, and there are sometimes smaller asks that they have that seems that you know, unless there's something that staff has a question about, which we would bring them to you in that case. We've seen enough about what your requirements are, what your conditions are, and your votes on these matters that we wanted to present you with some language to vote on that would allow us as staff to move some of these property owners forward a bit faster. The first one is the replacement of anachronistic materials or building elements. And Ms. Chekowicz sees a lot of this, and she can give you some additional examples. But essentially, if somebody is looking to remove a later but non-historic in its own right, later, say, architectural element to a house, like say some of those like mid to late 20th century iron work railings or iron work, columns or whatnot, and rather restore that particular element back to what it would have been at the time of the construction date of the property, then that is something that we as staff would like to sign off on. A couple of examples that Ms. Chekowicz provided are there below, that you can see in italics. Sorry, it's so late. I'm like kind of losing my ability to speak. Wendy, do you have some additional thoughts or examples on this, or a little summary you'd like to give?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, through you. Essentially what we want to do is people who, homeowners, property owners who are trying to do the right thing by making their property go back to what is architecturally or historically more appropriate for their building. We'd like to make it a little easier on them by allowing staff to do the reviews rather than having to go back to or go to the commission to get approval for those things, because essentially they're doing the correct thing and it should be a little bit easier on them. And staff has a good idea of what is or isn't appropriate for a building. So we, unless we had major questions or we didn't think it was okay, we should be okay to, I think, be able to do that for them at staff level.
Questions? Comments on that one?
Seems like a good plan to me.
I agree.
I think it's a good plan. I just am trying to think of any possible eventuality where is there situations, is there any limit to what, I think we're, in some ways, we're just kind of trusting your judgment to decide if someone's going to remove vinyl siding and discover questionable practices on dual, combinations of materials or complicated trim work, what might want a more collaborative thing. You'll just have to.
Mr. Chairman, that's absolutely correct. Yeah, that's exactly what we would do. Like, for example, if they want to take off vinyl siding and there was wood underneath, we'd say like absolutely, retain the wood, restore the wood. You can replace in kind anything that's damaged, but beyond that, like if they wanted to like take off vinyl siding and install hardy plank, we'd say no, you've got to go to the commission for that. That's a different story entirely. If there's detail work, fret work, trim, etc., we would require that they restore it. If they didn't want to and they wanted to remove it, that would have to go in front of the commission, absolutely. Things such as like removing a later addition to the house, that's not something that we would want to sign off on. That's something that would absolutely go in front of the commission, for sure.
Sure. How about windows?
That's the next one. That's a good question. So let's say, so the following, so Ms. Chekowicz has on there, the following is an example of the type of work that would not be approved at staff level and must come to the full commission, such as replacement of late 19th century windows on an early 19th century structure, right? That's a situation where those windows have probably become historic in their own right, and that needs to go to the commission. As it is right now, if there are existing replacement windows on a building, they can be replaced at staff level in kind with other replacement windows, right? That's already an authorization that you have for us. But when it comes to taking out windows, I'm sorry, there's going to be an interspecies fight again in a minute behind me. When it comes to taking out, later windows, that's something that we'd be very judicious about and bring to the commission for sure. Windows are something we take really seriously, and we don't take any guff about it either. So that would definitely come to the commission.
And I think down below we had roofing was one of your other items. So discuss that later.
Right, exactly. I can go through the next ones, or do you want me to go through the, okay.
Yeah, I think we're kind of in agreement with like item 1.
Okay. The next is installation of solar panels. I know so since I've been with the city, I'm in my 8th year now. You've never denied anybody the ability to put in solar panels. We did have one time when somebody wanted to take off a slate roof to install the solar panels, and we said, not in heaven, hell, or purgatory is that going to happen. You're going to the commission, and you denied them the ability to take off the slate roof, so they had to come back and find another way to do it, which they did because we know it's possible. So so to install solar panels, we'd like to be able to approve that at staff level. It's in keeping with, you know, what we want to do both as a city from a sustainability environment standpoint, and it's in keeping with state law, which basically says you can't stand in the way of, like, like reasonable green alternatives or alternative means of energy. What would require is that no slate roofs would be permitted to be removed as part of the installation, only select removal of a minimum number of slates, and then that would be conditioned on relevant projects. Electrical boxes would not be allowed to be installed on the front of a building, on the front facade, unless there's absolutely no other logistical way possible or location to put it on a building. And in such circumstances, we would require screening of some form as a condition of any approval. ISD also has rules that they don't allow on new construction, at least, things like utility meters and whatnot to be placed on a front facade either. So this would definitely be in keeping with that. We would also require that any associated mechanical equipment, if it needed to be visible from a public way, would be required to be screened as a condition of the certificate of appropriateness, and that we would indicate as staff what type of screening that would be, like if it's evergreen type of screening, or if it would be like a period appropriate, sort of like short, I say fencing, but to mask it a little bit. So that's the next item that we'd like to be able to approve at staff level. And obviously, if people don't agree with what we have proposed, or we have concerns about their project, we would bring them to you. But we always endeavor to work those out and talk to applicants beforehand to ensure that we're very, very clear about what they intend to do. Thoughts and questions? I can't see all of you, so.
That sounds good.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Okay. So the next one is installation of mechanicals themselves. So that includes AC compressors and heat pumps. You recall you had a recent project on Sycamore where there was some conduit material that was minimally visible from a public way, but it was visible. And so they had to come to the commission. In the past, we've also had people come with their mechanicals, AC condensers, and heat pumps that are going to be visible from a public way. So obviously, if they're not visible from a public way, we just sign off. But we would like to be allowed to approve such installations. We would like to say that no conduits or piping would be allowed on the front facade of a building ever. And if they wanted to do that and insisted upon it, they'd have to go to the commission. We would require screening, just as we would with the other, with the last item. So screening of those mechanicals, and we would also require that any exterior piping or conduits be either wrapped or colored the same color as the portion of the building against which it is installed. That's a common condition we used to use on zoning projects. And if you've noticed the way I've worded this, I have not said painted the color to which it should be, that matches the building. So there are certain ways that we could definitely say that. We can't require certain paint colors, but we can certainly require a material match the building. Thoughts, questions?
No, I think that summarizes what I would say any typical case like that.
Okay. The next one is to allow for preservation planning staff to determine when changes to a previously approved project are minor in nature and to allow staff to sign off on such changes. This came up recently with a project that Ms. Chekowicz was handling, where an applicant had received approval for windows. And actually, Wendy, why don't you explain it, because you're going to do it better than I can.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, through you. Recently, there was a project that came in to replace windows. They were given permission to replace the windows. However, part of the condition was that they changed the window frames to match the rest of the buildings because it was within a row house to the ones next to them. And the applicant later came back and said, well, the color isn't consistent through the row houses. We would like to change the color of the window frames. So this would allow us to make that call at staff level rather than them having to go all the way back to the commission for that sort of approval, like those smaller changes.
Because if they did have to come back to the commission for that, and we gave them the option at this point, they would have to then pay to re-advertise the case. So they'd have to pay the legal ad fee all over again, and then wait till the next available commission agenda was, which could be a month or 2 months down the line. So for things like that, we'd like to be able to approve minor changes. I think we have a good sense of when something is minor, and like minor is something that, like, just like a essentially that somebody who's like a passerby on the street would not it could be reasonably assumed that a member of the public who's passing by, as a passing interest in the building and in the project, would not necessarily notice the changes because they're that minor in nature. What we would do is we would issue a minor historic preservation change approval document, and that would outline the changes, the minor changes approved, and then the applicant would be required to upload that document to CitizenServe and amend it to their building permit application, so that there's a trail of every single thing that we would have approved. And the ISD would also have to follow through on it as well. Thoughts?
Is there currently we don't receive kind of any sort of digest of the stuff that comes through historic. We don't know what applications for non-applicability have been received or things like that. I don't want to create more work for folks, but I'm just wondering whether these are the kinds of things that we should at least be aware of that are happening, and keeping tabs on in some way. And so I don't know whether it is possible just to have a like a digest of, this came in, this was the thing, this is how it was resolved.
Sure. We could provide you a report, trying to think, each monthly meeting, because there's so much to get ready for the monthly meetings. We could do it on a monthly basis. It might be easier if we did it on like a bi-monthly basis or something like that, because some of these applications that come in don't get resolved right away. But we could give you a report. We could even do it like on a quarterly basis so that you could see the volume that comes in and what the asks are.
What do other people think about that? Would that be helpful information for other folks, or does that feel like just creating busy work for staff?
I feel like that is probably a good thing to do, at least at the beginning when we're figuring out how it's working. And we can look at it and say, hey, we might want to have weighed in on this sort of thing in the future. And maybe in a year or two, we sort of get it all worked out. And that's because this allows a lot of latitude as to what is sort of a de minimis kind of thing. And I think we're all more or less on the same page with that, but it could be that there's certain things that we didn't want to go with. I think when we, way back on our minutes, like way back, I believe we had on the agenda, a list of certificates of non-applicability granted or something. There's sort of like at the very end of the minutes, a listing of everything that staff had just granted that we weren't reviewing.
Oh, well, the minutes are on the agendas. I think they might have been on the agendas years ago. Yeah.
Agendas, that's what I mean. Yeah, I think of like a Christie thing. She used to do that maybe.
Right.
I don't know how much work
that we could sign off on, or the demos that we could sign off on, that type of thing. Yep.
Yeah, and it wasn't an action, it was just sort of like a FYI kind of listing.
Right, right.
That'd be one option.
I mean, you can certainly provide that again. The question is, how often would we want to do that? And I'm gonna look to Wendy because she's the one that has to deal with like the absolute, like, tragic bulk of stuff that comes in.
I mean, if I can speak up just for a moment, I think it's a very interesting question or proposition put forth. And I think actually having a little more data and a little more analytics, you know, probably don't need it any more than like 2 times a year on what comes in front of the commission. I mean, it'd be really interesting actually to be able to take a look at, you know, how many cases did we have 10 years ago on a certain area compared to today, you know, and what, you know, how many demolition reviews did we have? We just, you know, looking at kind of like a dashboard. And we do stuff like this at work all the time, but a lot of teams will put together like a monthly or quarterly dashboard. And I think just for us to be able to take a look at some kind of high level categories of what's being reviewed and where decisions are being made. And in particular, look at like trend lines, you know, 1 month goes by quickly. That's why I absolutely don't feel as though we need it monthly. I even think quarterly would be a bit much. I think it would be, you know, every half year or so. May be very interesting for us just to kind of better understand trends that are happening too in the city and things of that nature, where we're spending our time. So I like the idea of it, if it's not too much time, of course.
I almost feel like that's 2 separate things where, I mean, you're wanting that high level trend information. I'm wanting to see that 123 Main Street, you know, had this specific ask.
Okay.
And, you know, and this is what happened. So that we're just more clued into, you know, properties that are coming up or so that we are, you know.
I think the 2 can be accomplished, right? I think both asks can be accomplished. They are just done at 2 different levels. Like, I think the one that Ryan's asking about is something that maybe is done like twice a year, or maybe is done once a year, just so you can see it in fiscal year or what am I thinking? I was gonna say academic year because it's September, calendar year, because that's the way we tend to look at things, you know, when we look at things for the state. And also these are more analyses that we're doing as well. You know, just to see where our trigger points are in the city. And that's one of the things I've wanted, that is actually on coming up quickly on my list to work on with the GIS administrator, so we can plot where these things are happening, particularly with demos. Wendy, what do you think, like, because you keep a running list of all the projects that we have and we know what comes in, the challenge with them is, what you will find is that there are a lot of applications that come in and they're not complete by the time we have a meeting. So sometimes you'll see that, like, oh, it doesn't look like there's that much going on, but there's a ton, because like the absolute killer is the back and forth emails that we have to do with applicants. I did it for years, and now Wendy is dealing with it about, no, you need to turn in this. No, we don't have that. You know, no, we can't give you an update every day as to where your application is. You know, we're doing all this. So that's, so we don't, so those results will change. It'll seem very rapidly that they change, but some of the actual lifespan of a project is actually very long, because we have applicants that can't follow directions and turn stuff in.
Sure.
So, Wendy, what do you think? What is reasonable to ask for? Yeah. Dick, did you have a question first?
I actually just wanted to do a time check. It's now almost 10 o'clock and we need to wrap up pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, so really quickly, Mr. Chairman, through you, if it's okay and we want to have less information done or more pointed information, it could literally just be what we approve every month rather than what is in process.
Yeah,
That works.
I think that makes sense, because then It's not a question of when does this go on the list.
Right.
You know, and that's completing the little packet of information that I'm thinking would be useful, which is what's the property address, what was the ask, and what was the result.
Yep.
And we keep an Excel sheet with all of that information, so that's pretty
Yeah.
easy to gather.
Right. Okay, so am I hearing that you want to hold off on item 4, or that you are okay with item 4 based on the additional info provided in a report?
Okay with it with the additional info.
Okay,
I
got
am.
it.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the
So-
last, yeah, go ahead.
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
This is the last one. It's very specific to an item in the design review, in the design guidelines, which is to allow staff to approve changes to existing asphalt roofing materials. Like, we have somebody right now who wants to go from like 2-tab shingles or 3-tab shingles to architectural shingles. And technically, to go from that, from one to the architectural, it needs to come before the commission. And that's a very specific ask that we feel is something that we could sign off on at staff level.
Could I get some clarification? When we're talking about architectural shingles, are we talking about the ones that have become really common now that just sort of have a kind of rough texture? Or are we talking about other fancier architectural shingles as well, like slate imitations?
Oh, no, not slate imitations. No. That's basically
And I don't
plastic.
just mean
Yeah.
by slate imitations, the ones that really look like slate. I'm talking about, there's some that just have sort of scalloped edges with shadow.
No, we're talking about the architectural shingles that are more like, so if you think about wood shakes on a roof years ago, right? And they'd have like varying widths.
Sure, no. I know what that,
That's
and
it.
we in fact have those on our house. But
Yes.
I just wanted clarification about whether we were only talking about those or whether we were
Yes.
talking about other kinds of architectural shingles.
Yeah, no other shapes, no other whatever. If they want to go from a 2-tab shingle to a 3-tab shingle, yes, they should be able to do that, I think. Yep. And that's it.
Yeah, I'm generally fine. As Dick was kind of alluding to, there are some architectural shingles that look awful. And people say, well, they say architectural, therefore they're great. But, you know, they're, the world we live in is architectural shingles are the ones that give you the warranty. So it's kind of like the default nowadays.
Right. I think that with regard to that, we always ask for material examples before we approve anything and before we send anything to you guys. So they must provide us with exactly what they're planning to do.
I thought you were already handling shingles, roof shingle.
In
changes.
kind, yes, but the change from like say a 2-tab to an architectural is different, and that would have to go to you guys.
I think it's been years since we heard a shingle case.
I remember the last time you heard one too. It was my first day with the commission. It
I'm
was a
very
half
good
an
at
hour talking about the damn color, no offense.
I've become very good at explaining to applicants that if they just do an asphalt shingle in kind, they don't need to go to the commission. They usually just do that.
Okay, fine.
Okay. Fine.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm fine with this.
Yeah.
All
right.
I
So
would ask you to take a vote. Yep.
Okay.
still vote.
I move that we vote to approve the, what are we calling this? Staff approval.
New staff
letter,
level approvals.
in conjunction with a quarterly summary of cases that have come and been approved by staff.
I second that.
Okay, all in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Okay, and all we have left are minutes. Has anybody actually read them yet?
I have.
I did.
No, I got mostly through them.
Are there any, well, we have two sets. The first is the June minutes, I believe. Yeah, June 21st minutes. Were there any revisions to those? Or does anybody need some time?
I was not present, so I
That's
can't
okay.
the content.
And I was not present, so I'm happy to vote in favor of approving them based on what other people say, but I have nothing to add myself.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, through you, if I can, the city solicitor a few years ago, we had an issue with the ZBA. They were behind on minutes, and his determination was that the purpose of approving minutes and voting on minutes is basically just an acknowledgement that the meeting, essentially that the meeting occurred, because we had a lot of people voting on the minutes that weren't even on the ZBA at the time that they were taken. So you do not have to have been present at the meeting itself.
So the only comment I have about them, and this got fixed for the later set, is we're still sometimes carrying along a title, which then shows up if they get turned into PDFs. The agenda for today says March 15th HPC agenda. And the June minutes also have a title of March 15th HPC agenda. So we should just be careful that that doesn't happen, because then that gets carried along. The minutes for the July meeting did not have that. So thanks for whoever caught that.
Minutes are long.
Was Ryan at the meeting?
I was, and I read the June notes, and I didn't find any issues.
Okay.
In general, they seem very thoroughly done. So
yes,
yeah, I agree.
My compliments to whoever unfortunate soul has been doing these.
So
yeah,
we
I mean,
vote on the June.
the only things that I have to add would be like Chair Park's name sometimes has an E in it and sometimes doesn't. You know, stuff like that, but nothing substantive.
I think a motion to approve the June meeting
I'll
notes.
second that.
Okay, motion to approve June meeting minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Do a roll call of Vice Chair Kelly.
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
I abstain, even though I understand I don't have to.
sure. And I will vote yes. And we have another set of minutes from July.
So I had some notes in that about who was there, and so it lists 6 of us as all being present and on time. But throughout, it says things passed 5-0. I have to confess, I don't remember who else was there.
I think DJ was there. Al was out. All of us were there. I mean, I believe all of us. And then, what if there were 6? That would have then been DJ and Alan, because Adam hasn't been here for months, right? And so.
Right. Well, as an alternate, DJ would not, if there were a quorum of you, DJ would not, DJ's an alternate, so he would not vote.
Okay.
Right.
So,
I don't think that's correct. If we had a full complement of 7 commissioners, he couldn't vote, because alternates don't vote if we have a full panel of 7. But if we have a panel of 6, including alternates, the alternates vote.
Maybe what we need to do, since like there were 6 of you there and only 5 voting, and nobody abstained, maybe we should have the person who took the notes go back and listen to the recording again and suss this out.
I think DK was voting because, I mean, he's noted in discussion points. You know, everyone is noted at some point in discussion.
Yeah, and it's certainly what I remember him voting on things.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I think, Sarah, your recommendation is sensible. Someone should just
Yeah, I mean,
what
note
was going on at the vote level.
there were a couple other technical things like that on page 4. The section says motion, who made the motion and who seconded it. Looks like the motion was made by Robin.
And then there's a question mark.
It says the motion was removed. I think what that means is was withdrawn.
Yeah, that would be withdrawn. I think that the person who took these notes needs to go back and listen to the recording again.
Okay. And then there was another place, in particular on page 5. It says motion, who made, who and what, and then vote roll call. And it says motion was not passed unanimously, but doesn't list who voted which way. And that's a critical mission.
Especially with a roll call vote.
That's right.
Do we need to make a motion to return these for further work?
No, just I think that we'll just remove them from consideration, and yeah, we'll go back and have that person go through it again, because these are fundamental things that need to be captured. So yeah, so we just received these from the person who took the minutes, and we're just so overwhelmed that we don't have time to go listen through 6 hours of meetings again. So yeah, so they'll have to do it themselves. All right.
Okay.
All set?
I have no other comments. I mean, yeah, I appreciate Robin pointing out that my name is, frankly, the E comes and goes with such regularity, I don't even notice it anymore. But if they want to fix that up, that would be fine. And there are little details like switching from first person to third person here and there. I don't know how people feel about that. It's kind of like quoting them literally versus paraphrasing. It bounces back and forth.
I think those are some notes that we'll give to the person to watch out for and as they go back and clean it up.
Like I'm looking at page 5, Ron Cavallo comment where it's first person. I drive by these properties for all the reasons I have said before, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, we understand, but it'd be clearer if everything had the right voice.
Yep. Agreed.
Okay. Cool. Well, if that's the case, then I think we've gotten through everything on our agenda at last here. We'll punt the July minutes to next hearing.
Robin, you want to make the best motion of the night?
I move that we vote to adjourn.
Second.
Yay.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, do a roll call. Mr. Vice Chair Kelly?
Yes.
Valenthy?
Yes.
Mr. Bauer?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So there we have it.
Thank you all for agreeing to have that special meeting to get through all this stuff. If this were appended to a regular meeting,
That'd be bad.
It would not be a good night.
Very
I
bad.
think I'd quit.
Sarah and Wendy for all the detailed work. Really great as always.
good. We're glad that it's helpful, and thank God Wendy's here, because I don't know what I'd do without
Yeah.
her. So,
You guys are great.
Aw,
Thank you.
oh, good, she smiled. All right, well,
Well,
have a good rest of your night, everybody, and we will see you
too.
on October 6th.
all
That
righty.
sounds like a
Thanks,
plan.
Al.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.